American people said, you know what? Bernie wasn't crazy. He was actually right.
We had people to die. You can't get their lives back. Somebody needs to pay for this crime.
Going through a crush's Instagram, because I feel like a lot of people do that daily.
As Puerto Rico braced for Hurricane Dorian, President Trump prepared for disaster by insulting the island, the mayor of San Juan, and praising himself. Tonight is the cutoff to qualify for the next round of Democratic debates in September, and 10 candidates appear to have made the cut, while one who didn't, Senator Kristen Gillibrand, announced she's leaving the race. Former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal lamenting the state of polarization in America and obliquely criticizing the president as a polemicist. But the real intent of his op-ed was clear: to launder Mattis's own reputation ahead of the launch of his book in September. With 64 days to go before British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's deadline for a do-or-die Brexit, things have gotten regal. The Queen of England has agreed to Johnson's request to suspend Parliament for about 5 weeks until October 14. The suspension makes for a confusing timeline. British lawmakers are due back from break on September 3rd. That means the majority of Parliament who oppose a no-deal Brexit and all the economic chaos it's expected to bring will have less time to try to stop it. Activists, terrified of the idea that their prime minister is steamrolling democracy to deliver on a campaign promise, launched protests across the UK. Johnson says suspending Parliament has nothing to do with Brexit, and that his government needs the time to work out its domestic agenda, which will be formally announced on October 14th by, hello again, the Queen. But opposition lawmakers aren't buying it.
What the Prime Minister's doing is a sort of smash and grab on our democracy.
It's not democracy, it's dictatorship.
You know, we should get one of these things. Get my damn aggression out.
There's good reason for Bernie Sanders to be feeling aggravated these days.
Louisville, thank you!
For starters, the self-described democratic socialist has to convince more moderate Democrats, like many voters in Kentucky, that they're invited to join his political revolution.
Coal miners are not my enemy. Workers in the fossil fuel industry are not my enemy. Climate change is our enemy.
Sanders actually came really close in the Kentucky primary 4 years ago, and he did pretty well in Pennsylvania too. He'll have to do that again if he wants to hold off centrist good old boy Joe Biden. But Bernie's right flank isn't his only problem now. There are a lot of candidates pushing Sanders-style progressive platforms.
Much of your message is very similar to what you said in 2016.
And what I said in 1981 when I was mayor of Burlington.
For 30 years, exactly, yeah. And it's all on video. How is your campaign different this time?
It is different in a number of ways. 4 years ago, I was trying to say to the American people, you know what? Healthcare is a human right. We need to move toward Medicare for all. And people would say, oh, Bernie, it's a radical idea. Well, today, the American people said, you know what? Bernie wasn't crazy. He was actually right.
If the party and the American people are catching on now, did you miss your moment in 2016?
No, I don't think so. I think we're in a very good place. I think the message that we are fighting for, the ideas that we are fighting for, are ideas that are resonating with the working families of this country.
In Kentucky, Sanders reasserted his progressive credentials with his version of a Green New Deal, which would effectively end the use of fossil fuels by 2030. But it would also cost $16 trillion over 10 years.
I've always liked what Bernie had to say. The only thing that I'm a bit concerned about is how he would pay for all the projects that he's proposing.
Do you think that the way that he explains the cost of the programs right now, is he able to pay for them in your mind or no?
You know, it's one of those things, I'd have to see it all in black and white.
How do you convince people in Kentucky to get on board with your Green New Deal where it's going to cost $16 trillion, and you have union workers here, there are some coal miners. How do you convince those people that this is a realistic plan?
Well, it's not just the Green New Deal. Right now, here in Kentucky, which is a struggling state, let's be honest about it, a lot of low-wage workers here. You have a coal industry, which for a variety of reasons is struggling. And I think the way to address that issue is to bring forth an agenda that speaks to working people, whether they're white or they're black or Latino, whatever they may be.
One of the workers that I talked to today at the CWA event that you stopped by said he's worried about the cost. What do you say to someone like that?
What I say about it is that we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it. And before we even get to the cost of it, what you have to talk about is what does inaction mean? The truth is, it is an expensive proposition. I won't deny that for a second. But we pay for that in a number of ways. For example, do most Americans think we should be giving hundreds of billions of dollars a year in tax breaks and subsidies to an industry which is destroying the planet? I don't. We're going to end that. And when the federal government begins producing an enormous amount of electricity through sustainable energy, wind and solar, the federal government will be making substantial sums of money, which will help us pay for the cost. When we put millions of people to work in decent paying jobs, they're going to be paying taxes, which help us pay for the cost of this. But I start off with the premise, Liz, that we have no choice in this matter.
He's also tweaked his Medicare for All plan to make it more palatable to the labor movement, hoping to win over powerful union bosses in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Now, some of you may have read that just last week, we issued the strongest, most comprehensive pro-union program in the history of this country.
And it may be working. In Pittsburgh, Sanders won the backing of the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America.
A motion would be in order to endorse the candidacy of Bernie Sanders for President of the United States. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Approved.
The problem for Sanders is that this time, none of these moves are his alone. And there's one candidate who's using his playbook especially well.
You and Senator Elizabeth Warren have a lot of similar positions on issues. Why should someone vote for you over her?
Well, that's a decision that someone is going to have to make. I stand with the working class. Throughout my life, I've taken on Wall Street, the insurance companies, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry.
She's done a lot of that, too.
Well, that's fine. And people will make Elizabeth happens to be a friend of mine. I've known Elizabeth for over 20 years.
But when do you have to stand up and say, my plan about X, Y, and Z is better than hers? I mean, how do you win over these Democratic voters in this primary
we're winning them
process?
over every day. I mean, that's what I do.
So you won't directly criticize any of her policies?
It's not just Elizabeth. That's not what I think. That's not what I do. I mean, there will be a time and a place, obviously, where we'll...
When is that?
Well, that's a media question.
Yeah, but you're not
No, that's not what the
American
people are not coming up to me. The American people are saying, Bernie, how are you going to implement your Medicare for all single
I've heard
payer?
that somebody did ask you recently, though, what's the difference between you and Elizabeth Warren? Why should I vote for you?
I mean, what people want to know is what I stand for, and people can make that decision.
Today, China warned Australia not to try and meddle with its decision to prosecute an Australian writer and former diplomat for espionage. Yang Hongjing went missing on January 18th, and it turned out he'd been secretly detained, even though at first, China's foreign ministry denied knowing where he was. In President Xi Jinping's China, this is part of a trend. The same thing happened to the scientist who claimed he edited the genes of babies, to a Supreme Court justice, a famous photographer, and a 29-year-old who splashed ink on a poster of the president. Then there were the Canadians who disappeared after their government arrested the CFO of Huawei. And last year, the former chief of Interpol and China's highest-paid actress both somehow vanished.
One trend we're seeing is the profile of individuals is increasing. It shows the brazenness in which China is increasingly turning to this type of arbitrary and secret detention to punish opponents and to signal to other would-be opponents that it will tolerate less and less confrontation.
Before Xi became president in 2013, the authorities did have ways to legally make people disappear, but their powers have grown. That same year, a new law went into effect that let police secretly detain people they deem a threat to national security. And last March, an amendment to the Constitution expanded that power to cover a much broader range of suspected crimes. The amendment created the National Supervision Commission, an office under Xi that ostensibly investigates corruption by members of his party. But the police who carry out its orders can hold people for up to 6 months without notifying family or a lawyer if they only have a connection to the accused, or once worked for a party member or state agency, which in China means basically anyone.
It might start in any number of ways. Sometimes a group of officers, some in uniform and plain clothes, will come banging on your door in the middle of the night, or in other times you might be picked up off the street, perhaps after dropping a child off at school. And we've seen that, certainly in the last few years, continually this sort of high-profile secret detention leading to often forced confessions is taking place.
That might be why the Supreme Court justice admitted to the crime of stealing documents, and why the Interpol chief came out of hiding to resign from his job. While the actress Fan Bingbing confessed to cheating on her taxes while apologizing to the, quote, party and the country. Others, including the protester who threw ink and the photographer, haven't been seen. Canada's still negotiating the release of its citizens, who it says are being held arbitrarily. But China's foreign ministry responded, saying, quote, everything in China is done in accordance with the law.
What China is trying to do, at the same time that it's masking its lawlessness behind the veneer of the rule of law, it's also trying very hard to supplant and to change the rules of the international community and to change what international law even says.
I want to see some orange jumpsuits right quick, and some of them in it. You know, we had people to die. You can't get their lives back. Somebody needs to pay for this crime. Somebody needs to pay. On a daily basis, usually it takes me 6 bottles to fill this particular pot up.
Life in Flint, Michigan has gone on. Just not the way Claudia Perkins thought it would. How many bottles of water are you going through each day?
Depending on how many meals I cook during the day.
Roughly.
A lot of water a day would be all of those.
4 packs of 24, so almost 100 bottles.
Because if I'm cooking, yeah. Flint is pretty much the same as it was when this ordeal first started. I think people are let down. You know, some of them don't believe anything is going to happen. That's the attitude. Overall, a lot of them just have lost faith in.
You've watched that happen?
Yes. I've heard it so many times from so many people.
What do people say?
Nothing's gonna happen.
The water crisis in 2014 killed at least a dozen people here and sickened untold numbers. It's not clear how many households are still getting water that's unsafe. But the despair in Flint is about more than just the city's still broken water system. It's about justice, too. In January of 2016, the state's attorney general appointed Todd Flood to lead the criminal prosecution.
If laws have been broken, if violations have occurred, then you pay the price.
And it looked like Flood was making progress. In less than 2 years, 15 public officials were charged with crimes ranging from involuntary manslaughter to evidence tampering. 7 bargained their cases down to misdemeanors. In exchange for their cooperation, their records would be wiped clean. The rest faced felony charges and potential time in prison. Then this April, Michigan's new attorney general fired Flood. 2 months later, the 8 remaining cases were dropped.
It was surreal at the time for me. Kind of gave me a gut check, because, listen, we poured a lot of time and energy into this case, right?
Why do you think you were let go?
With the victor, there is a spoil. I'm the spoil, right? So there's a new administration, a new regime, and ultimately they made their decisions, and I respect it. That's that.
We warriors, Flintstones.
Flood wasn't the only one caught off guard. The people of Flint were too. So 2 weeks after the announcement, the new team called the town hall to explain themselves.
When we first came into the investigation, it's no secret that we had some very real concerns.
Some major concerns. I'm not here to bash any particular person, but what I am here to do is tell you how a criminal investigation should be run. I think I may have told the Attorney General, we're gonna have to start from scratch.
The team claims mountains of potential evidence were ignored or kept from prosecutors, including millions of pages of documents and a slew of cell phone records.
I'm sure that many of you at some point in time heard about the boxes in the basement. Okay. There were also hard drives on there. We examined the hard drives, and what we see on the hard drives are phone dumps.
They say the investigation has to start over, and that's confused a lot of people in Flint.
What I see here today really pisses me off. I really trusted Todd Flood. So my question to you, is there a cover-up of the cover-up?
What we can say to you fully and completely is we are going to let the facts and evidence be our guide. You released to the press, dropping the charges without coming here first, without any kind of communication. We understand your legal position. We do, we're not stupid. But you could have at least, the very least, have said, we're going to be doing something, we can't talk about it. You know, just any kind of acknowledgement that we exist.
Right. We will not be ran over by anybody. And we are the ones that will decide when justice is done. We're not going to depend on you to tell us. We're not going to depend on Todd Flood to tell us. We know when justice is done, and we'll decide that.
You can feel the skepticism in the room.
Yeah. This case that we're working on, that is literally built around government mistrust. It would be naive to think that we can come here and say, well, you have to trust us now.
A good portion of the presentation tonight was kind of a taking down of the former investigation, the investigation by Todd Flood. Do you think that the former investigation was not done in good faith?
I don't know people's intents, right? I can't jump into their head and ask, why did you do what you did? He was in charge of holding people accountable. People spent their resources, their money, their tax dollars on a 3-year investigation that resulted with absolutely 0 convictions. They deserve better, quite frankly. That's the reason why he's not on the team.
Flood believes his cases would have stood up in court, but he won't address any specific allegations.
I wish I could sit in a town hall meeting, and I wish I could expose everything I know and give all the facts to the case I know. But that's not appropriate. We were moving the ball down the field. We got pleased with cooperation agreements. I think the proof's in the pudding. We did. So, and we were still going. We were still working.
You've worked on a lot of cases throughout your career.
Yes.
Where does this kind of rank in the how fucked up what happened was?
The highest. The highest. History will show how many people ultimately got sick, how many people ultimately passed away. There's nothing even close. So, that's where it ranks in my world.
You think Flint fatigue is real? I've heard that term thrown around of people not continuing to look at what happened in Flint.
Sickest thing in the world, but yes. That's the saddest thing, and it irks me. The general public wants speed. They want things to happen quickly. And it doesn't always work that way.
I'm torn, because right now, nobody has that 100% trust in anybody right now, because we've been duped by so many that were supposed to be for us. I listened to Kim Worthy and Fatwa, I'd like to believe them. I'd like to believe them. I'm waiting to see.
Do you think you'll see justice in your lifetime?
I pray I do. I pray I do.
My name is Jay Som, and I'll be talking about Tenderness from my album Anako.
Show me before you haunt me on the screen. Will my affection pull the string?
Tenderness is about imagining yourself laying in bed and thinking about your new romantic partner, going through a crush's Instagram. This track came up because I was feeling pretty into R&B music at the time. I started with this vintage drum machine, and I started playing it on my MIDI keyboard, just the I feel like it's such a dancey, floaty drum beat. The guitar part was probably the second most important for the song because it's so languid and it's just held. I kind of wanted to mimic a piano, as if the piano player was just holding down the notes and sustaining them. That was the foundation for the whole song. And then I came up with the vocals. And I really wanted it to sound intimate and as if someone recorded it a long time ago. Someone talking through the phone and talking to their new romantic partner and really pleading with them.
Tell me, did you fall in at first glance? Do you think you'll take a chance?
Originally, that was supposed to be the whole track, 1 minute and 30 seconds, until I made the decision to make this big, funky song. I really wanted Tenderness to sound like a Steely Dan song. If Steely Dan came out in 2019, I really wanted to use the same sort of instrumentation. They have a Wurlitzer piano, and they got a really plucky, sort of motivating bass, and really shuffly drums, and plinky guitar parts too. I am a melody first, lyrics last person. So it's much easier for me to hear a melody in my head and build a song that way. And then I think about lyrics last and how they can relate with the arrangement of the song.
Nothing's ever good enough. Tenderness is all I've got.
I picture the song playing in malls or yachts, at yacht parties. Hopefully people, really extremely wealthy people, find this on Spotify or something on their chill out indie playlist and they blast it.